Masters Bangkok has really proven Taeho's value in the current meta, as he was the most picked agent during the entire tournament, being played in 56% of all comps. Despite this, T1 were able to win the whole thing with one of the lowest Taeho pick rates at the event, playing him in only 19% of their games. Not only that, instead of playing Taeho, T1 were playing double duelist comps, which has long been criticized for being a very old school approach to Valorant. It's funny how the original DRX roster was one of the first teams to master double initiator comps, and now in 2025, Buzz and Stax have won their very first international championship as one of the only teams still playing double duelist. In this video, we're going to look at how T1 completely broke the Taeho meta by using double duelist comps in the most util heavy meta we've ever seen. To do this, we're going to analyze several important maps from their lower final against EDG and grand final against G2. I'm going to explain exactly why their double duelist comps were so effective and why they might have been a better counter to the Taeho meta than you might think. Stay tuned until the end because I'm also going to break down the last map on Pearl and the important adjustments T1 made in the final moments of the tournament, which earned them their very first Valorant championship. First of all, when you watch the clips that T1 players pull off, it's really easy to think that T1 are just mechanically superior, but trust me when I say that there is a lot of team play and strategy that goes into creating good opportunities for them. For example, here's a clip of Buzz's Eco Round 3K against EDG on Fracture, which started their comeback on the map. At a first glance, this just seems like an insane solo play from Buzz, but let's see how the round actually unfolded. T1 starts this defender side eco with players spread apart on all 4 parts of Fracture. This is a really unique strategy, since Fracture is a map where it's really easy to spread too thin. The more common play you'll see from other teams is overstacking 1 or 2 areas to trap and fight. This is how EDG opened their defensive half on Fracture, with 4 players in B main and completely giving up the north side of the map. So it definitely seems weird at a first glance why T1 would split up so much. However, it's all a well-planned mind game. T1's Taeho drone in arcade and breach flash outside of Dish makes EDG work more slowly because they're wary of a trap towards Dish, and this buys valuable time for T1's players to walk down B main. Buzz controls A main lightly just to cause a bit of resistance so his B main flankers can have a better opportunity, and this works perfectly as EDG's Taeho backs up right into the flank. EDG now knows that 3 players are towards the other side, so they correctly speed up their exec from drop. EDG knows Buzz is in A main, so how did he sneak out of the smoke? You can even see Brimstone looking at the smoke, and their Cypher coming late up Dish would have seen Buzz push out the smoke as well. But T1 sends 2 perfect Taeho rockets that cause EDG to turn away and pushes off the players watching the smoke in A main. This timing is perfect and allows Buzz to sneak into heaven. Remember that EDG's Taeho couldn't get info in A main because he was pressured on the flank. EDG are absolutely convinced that Raze is still in A main, and all these tactics set up Buzz to make this play, and of course his aim is insane, but he would have never had a chance to pull this off if T1 didn't stall the Dish push, pressure the A main flank, and rocket perfectly to give him a timing to sneak out. T1 clearly has a strong understanding of how tactics and team play can set up these individual moments, and this is the basis for why their team can make so many individual plays to begin with. Here's another Buzz clip on Haven, also against EDG, who are considered to be one of the stronger mechanical teams at the event. Again, surface level, this just looks like a solid individual round from Buzz. However, every single kill that he earned was off his team's pressure this round. First, the ISO vulnerable prevents the rest of EDG from entering to trade, and ever so slightly pulls Kong Kong's focus, so he loses the first peek. Then, Stax taps the orb and Buzz is the one who gets the trade. Buzz falls back to sight, and Meteor protects him from the Taeho drone, so his position in short is still unknown. Then, when EDG push sight, the Omen util comes just in time to prevent them from clearing Buzz. Now Meteor's ISO ult pulls another player off site before EDG can stabilize, and on this timing, Buzz uses the Chaos to kill Omen, and now he's got a free kill onto the ISO ulted player as well. Finally, his team is flooding sight off of these kills, so the final kill is on Taeho, who isn't even looking at him. Buzz happened to be the one in the position to win it all for T1, and of course he has to hit the shots, but every single kill can be credited to the support of his teammates. I just want you guys to understand that T1 are not just shooters, but also know exactly how to call the right tactics and how to create good situations for all their teammates to carry. Without these fundamentals, their double duelist comps would completely fall flat. But you guys should also understand that their double duelist comps are nothing like the old double duelist comps. T1 weren't really playing the old Jett Phoenix, Jett Reyna, or even Jett Raze comps that we used to see. The only exception was when T1 played Jett and Reyna on Abyss in the grand final, which was their permaban map throughout the tournament. Since they had no map bans coming from the lower bracket, they likely chose Jett and Reyna for simplicity and comfort on a map they didn't know well. Other than that single exception, T1 were playing modern day duelists which all offer unique tactical advantages that far outperform the old style in terms of strategy. Masters Bangkok was a turning point in the Valorant meta because it's the first time in history that Jett or Raze was not the most played duelist at an international event. Instead, Yoru was the most picked duelist at Masters Bangkok with a 46% presence in all comps because teams have finally realized that he has everything you need in a duelist. His ult allows for strong exec potential, his TP allows for cross-map playmaking and incredibly strong defaulting, his clone is one of the only abilities in the entire game that can reliably trigger all enemy sentinel utility, and he still has a flash that he can use to support himself or his team. We've all known that Yoru has been strong for a long time, but in my opinion, his recent popularity is a special result of the Taeho meta as well. Yoru is the only duelist who can fearlessly enter areas that Breach and Taeho utility have priority over, escape with his TP, and then punish defenders for running these traps in the first place.
Out of place here, our drone's coming, but he doesn't care. See me all you want, it's easy to catch him. Deny this, Stax gets out with his life, but the pressure's still coming, but look at the TP! Buzz, he's right back behind them, T1 running him!
One of the most annoying parts about playing against Yoru is that you can never attain true priority of any area against a good team who knows how to use him. In this clip, EDG uses the Taeho Breach combo early in the game to try and condition T1 away from setting up fights in Brick. But Buzz can continue to play this spot over and over without any worries because he can always Yoru TP out reactively, so EDG's conditioning and utility has absolutely no effect on the Yoru comp. This is why I think teams were finally forced to learn an agent like Yoru, because he became a necessity to actually play against the Taeho meta. My hot take is that this meta was way more about how teams used Yoru rather than how teams were using Taeho, and I think T1 understood this most of all because Yoru was basically their flex initiator on all their strongest maps. I think the general assumption that people made was that by playing these double duelist comps, T1 were at a tactical disadvantage, but let me explain why this was not true at all. Their best maps featured Yoru combined with a different duelist like ISO on Haven, Raze on Split, or Neon on Pearl, and it's how they use these unique combinations which really show that T1 have such a strong grasp of map theory. Most people would think that ISO is just a better version of Reyna since he still needs to take peeks for his utility to be effective, but his kit is perfectly designed for a map like Haven. Haven is a map where you must take peeks to fight for control because the map layout on every part opens with long angles with multiple off angles to challenge. This is why we see a lot of dry fights happen across the map because both teams are fighting for control of the default angles in A lobby, front B, and C long. Although you can use utility to support these peaks, both teams cannot force control anywhere without using a lot of utility, and even then, attackers have a lot of options to break these setups apart. Compare this to a lot of other maps, like Ascent's A main, which can be won with a single one-way, or Split, where there are deadly util traps all over the map that take complete control. This is exactly why the Cypher Cam is one of the most important pieces of utility on Haven, and it's exactly why Haven has one of the highest AWP usage rates of any map in the pool. You'd think that Bind or Abyss, being one of the longer maps in the pool, would have higher AWP usage rates, but only 19.5% of rounds played on Bind at Bangkok had an AWP, and only 22.1% of rounds on Abyss had an AWP. On Haven, 32% of all rounds played at Bangkok featured an AWP, because the AWP is the most fundamental way to get an advantage when fighting these angles dry. This is exactly why ISO is so strong on this map, because not only does his shield hard counter the op, his entire kit is designed to control these types of fights and take them the way he wants. If you think about it logically, since it's hard to force control with util on Haven, ISO's shield is the only ability that will always give you an advantage. Now combine the priority that ISO earns on this map with Yoru's ability to completely break setups on both attack and defense, and you're gonna have a really hard time dealing with this comp. Watch how Qiqi walks down mid on defense to challenge grass control because it's such a necessary thing to do on Haven, but unfortunately he's on Cypher and not ISO or Yoru, so he doesn't have any advantages making this play. T1 on the other hand liked making this play with Yoru and ISO together because Yoru can take the deeper contact and TP out if in trouble, and ISO can take the safer fight with his shield. EDG may have played the broken Breach and Taeho combo on Haven, but T1 showed that they understood the map at a more fundamental level and broke them apart by using the Yoru and ISO combo instead. It really goes to show that even with broken utility combos in the game, the team that understands the map better will come out on top, and the quote-unquote best comp is completely subjective to the team's playstyle, which leads us to the last map of the Bangkok final on Pearl. T1 chose to play Neon to pair with Yoru on Pearl, so let's understand how they use this combo effectively and what adjustments they made in the final moments just in time to win the game. T1 started with a strong defensive half and used the combination of Yoru and Neon threats as a major part of their game plan. Although Neon's stun isn't as strong as Breach's, it can still be used very effectively to run trap plays and support her teammates. When this is comboed with the Yoru flash, they essentially have a full initiator combo and two duelists who are naturally there to fight off this utility. This is showcased by T1 immediately in the first round, where they open with a 3-man trap play in A main. You can see that they're waiting for a timing where G2 crosses the initial choke so they can trap them into a fight. They use the stun flash combo, and watch how Astra waits to drop the star so they don't give it away too early, but G2 still gets out of the trap just in time. Regardless, T1 earns A main control off of this, and on top of that, Yoru TPs out to B once A main is cleared, so there are no real map weaknesses to take advantage of on this timing. But G2, having watched T1's VODs, makes an incredibly smart call. This is the same defensive play we saw from T1 just a couple days earlier against EDG. You can see T1 set up for a big trap in A main with Yoru TP floating to B. In this setup, T1 has the Killjoy turret gain information in B long instead of investing an actual player there, and this is what helps prompt the rotation to B. So knowing this, once G2 sees the trap in A main, they have chamber peek B main to trigger the turret. This prompts T1 to rotate, while the rest of G2 walk up A main again. Now, Sova and Yoru have rotated away to B, and Neon is all alone on A with no stun to help when G2 starts to hit the site. But watch how long it takes G2 to actually set up their entry onto A. They need to wait for the Yoru TP to cross to default, and by the time they're moving into the exec, T1 have already rotated over into the site to help. G2 outcalled T1 and created a timing to exec, but didn't have the right tools to fully capitalize on this advantage. And remember this as we'll be comparing it to T1's attack sides later on. Let's take a look at a couple more examples of how Neon and Yoru work together well to run T1's defense. In round 4, we see the duo set up in Art, with Yoru opping and baiting for Neon playing behind the box. This setup allows T1 to fight for mid and play more of a retake setup on B with Killjoy utility, while ensuring that they can take a big fight on A. G2 sets up the A exec again, and Jagamo has to work the entry by himself but loses the first fight. Then, Neon and Yoru have immediately rotated onto site and play off each other perfectly to close out the round. It's these little things with Neon crossing left, forcing the wide swing with Yoru flashing on contact that creates the baseline for this entire strategy to work. You'll see that when Neon and Yoru are in sync like this, they don't only become the initiators for trap plays, they're also the info gatherers, the rotators themselves, and the ones actually taking the fights all at the same time. Here's a really interesting round from T1 where it seems like Neon is AFK at the start of the round, but this is actually a real strategy. T1 have Yoru playing for instant info in B main, while Sova is droning for instant info towards A. This allows T1 to immediately make a guess on where the strong side is and abuse Neon's fast rotation capabilities. When Yoru hears noise in B main, Neon commits her first rotate towards B. G2 takes B main control and leave the Vice Flash on Pillar to scare T1 off from regaining information. Now watch how T1 reacts to this. On the Astra Smoke, Yoru crosses to the left to play a high risk, high reward angle, but because his TP is set up for him to escape, he mitigates a lot of that risk. Now, T1 knows they need to re-clear B long to make the correct mid-round adjustments, so Neon jumps spots from back hall with speed to create a timing for Yoru to peek, and this now gives T1 all the info they need in B long. G2 runs some fake pressure into B link, but when Killjoy sees that this is gone, T1 makes the read that G2 are actually going A. When G2 hits the site, there are already 3 players prepared to flood. T1 set themselves up to win this round because of how they used Yoru and Neon to collect info, and now you should understand why T1 were never at a tactical disadvantage to begin with. They understood exactly how to use their comp to achieve the necessary macro goals, but their comp also enables incredible players like Buzz to pull off the individual plays they've been known for all these years.
Has a shot, overdone pop Buzz is absolutely massacring them! A 3K, the 4th!
T1 were up 8-4 going into their attack half, but we know that G2's playstyle really shines on the defensive half. This graph shows the retake win rate on the x-axis plotted against the defensive win rate of teams on the y-axis for all teams at Bangkok. This allows us to see the interactions between a team's ability to retake and their ability to win defensive rounds. G2 were by far the best team on defense at Bangkok, winning nearly 60% of all their defensive rounds. You can see that retakes were a massive part of G2's defensive game plan, as they won more than 46% of all their retakes, which was by far the most out of all teams at the event. T1, on the other hand, only won 26.7% of their retakes, which was actually the second worst out of all teams at Bangkok, but they still had the second highest win rate on defense, which means that retakes were simply not a central part of their game plan. An interesting thing to note is how Sentinels had a pretty high retake win percentage, while having a pretty bad overall win rate on defense, which means they might want to explore playing a heavier retake style on defense to improve their defensive win rate. Retakes are clearly G2's bread and butter on defense, and this is exactly what stumped T1 in the second half on Pearl. Other than the pistol round, every single round that G2 won in regulation was a retake, and a lot of these rounds looked like T1 were in control right up until G2 completely destroys them. Let's talk about how G2 were able to win retakes so consistently, what T1 are doing wrong in the post plants, and how they're able to get the bomb down so often in the first place. T1 were able to plant the bomb nearly every single round on this half, despite G2 having a double Senti comp. And this isn't necessarily because G2 are playing completely off the sites. It again has a lot to do with the Neon Yoru comp and their ability to dive together. Another agent we need to talk about here is Vice. Vice's popularity is another side effect of the Taeho meta, as she had the highest pick rate out of any Sentinel agent at the event with 33%. Teams started really experimenting with her because her wall cannot be broken by Taeho utility, so teams realized that she can stall site hits really well regardless of the other team's comps. However, both Yoru and Neon are still able to clear the wall together because Yoru has TP and ult, which can clear the wall for free, while Neon triggers the wall and runs past. This means that T1 has complete power to break these Vice setups on their execs. T1 was able to take enough space with this combo to consistently get the bomb down in the first place, so how are G2 destroying them in the retake? G2 has such an elite understanding of how Pearl works, because the key is how they were using their comp to control the map. You might think that double Senti means that you can hold sites better, but I literally gasped when I saw them pull out this comp and realized how they were using it. Let's talk a bit about Pearl's map theory. Mid on Pearl is one of the most awkward spots for defenders to hold because you don't want a lurk to sneak through, but if you die there, you immediately create a weak side for attackers to take advantage of. Here's a clip from a previous video on Paper Rex where Jing dies in double doors, and even though he gets a kill, DFM knows they can immediately overwhelm B. This is why we saw some teams like Sentinels completely give up mid control in a lot of rounds, because they've decided that the risk reward is just not worth it to invest any players there. We saw a lot of rounds from them where a player is literally sitting in defender's spawn while all other players are committed towards sites. But the thing is, the most important part about retaking is ensuring that you have multiple angles to encroach the site on. The majority of G2 setups were to play retake on A, which means you at minimum need art control and ideally also have a flank through A main. G2's solution to this mid problem was allowing Chamber and Yoru to control it together. Not only does the Chamber trip work well to safely collect info on one side, both Chamber and Yoru can easily TP out of mid and fall back to sites if they're being targeted. Now, if T1 makes themselves known on one side of the map, G2 are still in position to take control of mid or run the flank, and Chamber's position was the biggest factor in ensuring G2 won all their retakes. In round 15, we see the same setup again. This time, T1 has no art presence, so Chamber can retake art and focus his attention towards the site. They do it again in round 16, but this time Killjoy wants to try a lurk through B link. Chamber is patient because he knows his team is playing retake on A, so he doesn't need to rotate early and waits patiently holding doors. He catches Killjoy again, and knowing that's T1's lurker, he quickly works up the A main flank. Again, he's a major piece in this retake as he pinches the players in A main right as his team enters site. They do it again in round 17 with a slight variation where Chamber peeks art first, then regroups with Yoru at double doors. Round 18 is the first time we saw them move out of this setup, and the reason was specifically because they knew T1 had the Astra ult. This usually signals a B exec, so now they're looking to pressure them early in B main. When Chamber and Yoru take small fights like this, they can slow down T1's execs significantly because now T1 have to use utility to clear, and both agents can just TP out whenever they want. Now they've bought a lot of time for the rest of G2 to get into position for the retake, and T1 have way less space to work with than they would have if they were allowed to just scale all the way up B long. This time, Vice is the one running up the flank to completely checkmate another post plan. It seems like G2 had everything figured out, so what did T1 have to change to win their post plans? If we revisit how T1 were actually playing their post plans, it seems like G2 were just able to stroll out onto site for free and get control of the bomb without resistance each time. T1's biggest problem was that they kept backing out of the deep control they took, and then G2 had a really comfortable time just coming out during the retake. Round 16 is one of the most blatant examples of this, where Neon and Yoru actually take control of Secret, get a kill, and force another player out. But when the bomb gets planted, they suddenly both fall back to default. G2 literally just walk up into site and break the setup, which also puts the supportive players in A main on a much shorter timer. If you take a look at T1's comp, they don't have the tools like Taeho Rockets or a KO Molly to actually play a post plant off site. They're playing way too passively in the post plant when they have two duelists that are great at taking control. In this post plant on B, why is Neon immediately running to check flank instead of helping Yoru fight for back hall? If Neon had stayed with Yoru in back hall during this fight, I think this post plant goes in a completely different direction. Just before it's too late, T1 start to realize that they need to be way more aggressive on their post plant. In round 21, it's the first time they've actually played to hold control of something in the post, and they managed to cause enough chaos and stall time on the bomb so Stax can actually play for the clutch. They may have played more aggressively because they were on an eco, but T1 now have a hunch on what they need to do. Now we get to the infamous round 23, where everyone refers to as the round G2 through the game. Yoru and Chamber are set up again to be a nuisance and look for picks as T1 scale into sight. Giacomo gets 2 kills before the retake, and now everything is set perfectly for them to win the game, but within moments, everyone on G2 dies. On one hand, you can say that G2 threw the round, but on the other hand, T1 only capitalized on G2's mistakes because they finally fought back on the retake entry. Imagine if T1 played this round like they did all their other post plans on this map. G2 would have been the Bangkok champions, and this video would have been about them instead. In the last round of the final, you can tell that G2 are already on their last legs. Their setup doesn't look right at all, as Sova is redundantly playing and droning art when the chamber trip is already set up there. Yoru and Chamber aren't playing together for probably the first round ever in this game, and when Chamber misses the shot, we see T1 peek aggressively into dugout to punish him, but this time they don't completely back out of backside. On G2's retake, T1 make clear attempts over and over to fight while G2 tries to take control of the bomb. For the very first time, G2 don't get free control of backside as soon as the retake starts. Meteor is T1's third duelist and he's done with flanking. He gets on site himself and makes it impossible for G2 to take backside or even get a look at the bomb. G2's defensive game plan was near flawless, but right before G2 could close out the game, T1 with their backs against the wall figured it all out and finally won their very first international championship.